Hey, I'm Kailan here from Bego Games. I'm here with...
Aleksander Rostov.
Robert Kurvitz.
And so what's your position at ZOM?
I'm lead designer for No Truce with the Furies.
And I'm the art director.
Okay, and so just a basic question. So it's very oddball and, it strikes the eye, but so what is No Truce with the Furies?
It's a detective RPG. Isometric RPGs with character role-playing, story-heavy, pretty hardcore stuff.
Yeah, like Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, exactly. Or Planescape Torment or Pillars of Eternity or stuff like that. We're doing the same thing, but with a detective kind of thing. And with slight modifications, we don't do turn-based or tactical combat. We have all the combat happen within the story. And we have this kind of surreal modernist setting where things happen because it's a detective story. And a little palm-sized open world where you can go around and solve this very open-ended quest and also get to meet a lot of strange, sometimes threatening people and hear some pretty foul language, get really angry, go to Reddit and then write about it. But yeah, we're pretty proud of our art and writing, and I think it's time for another try at the detective RPG, or the first try at the detective RPG. Actually, I think.
But also, it's like on the surface level, or I guess on the macroscopic story level, it's a detective story, but also it's very much about personal redemption.
Yes.
It's about
professional redemption.
And professional redemption, because you play as essentially an alcoholic who quite possibly tried to drink himself to death last night.
And that's where you kind of wake up. So this kind of cop character, this is the worst of the bad cops. This guy is on death's door, and that's where you kind of find him and become him and try to make sense of police work, try to crawl back into the good graces of your friends and colleagues. But because, the world where it's in, it's not our world. It's a kind of 15-year, tremendously ambitious world-building project that we've done of a kind of modernist otherworld or world-building thing. So, a hermetic otherworld like, Middle-earth, but it isn't in medieval stasis. It's in a modern era, like in 70s or 50s kind of stuff. It has a tremendously rich history behind it, and you kind of start discovering through your character the history of this world, and the world differentiates itself from our world in many drastic things that slowly start coming to. So it's not a completely realistic place. There are paranatural phenomena there, and then the technology that our world quite doesn't have. So rest assured, it's not a boring Philadelphia cop story. It's nerdy enough to go and find lore too, but the lore doesn't come at you as a first thing.
It's slowly introduced over time, slowly bleeds into the actions you do, the things you see, the events that unfurl themselves and so on like that.
Yeah, I think lore is the great strength and the great weakness of RPGs. We're really trying to introduce it to you in a kind of very natural way, so that first of all you have your character. First of all, you have your character's motivation and trying to be a police officer for some reason.
Or really a human being.
Or a human being. And trying to, not fumble up and kind of work your way around the world. So we really proud ourselves in being the role-playing game, the role of a human being and a cop. But you also start to find out mysterious things about the world and this case that happened. And it's a real full-fledged, it's going to take you the better part of a week or an entire week. So it's a big game, and it's a big area, but it's not a giant open world like Skyrim or something. We like to think it's palm-sized.
Yeah.
Because you're a cop, you need to pay attention to intricate details everywhere.
Yeah.
So you don't get to run over 70 kilometers of grassland, killing every centaur on your way. You're a meticulous cop, so you go into the walls of floorboards, or and then the world, which is rendered in, and I kid you not, the lushest of the lush details that video games usually tell you about. We really wanted to meticulously work your way through it like a cop would.
Yeah, and it's this cop is deeply flawed as well, and that was one of the really striking things about No Truce with the Furies, because usually there's a lot of exterior conversations going on. This is one of the very few that I've seen where you're almost fighting within your own personal demons, suggesting things to you, talking to you, maybe setting new goals, like finding a sad song to do karaoke with.
One of the strangest things you can do is invent the future of dance music. But you can do stuff here, and it's all pretty realistically written out. So it's not a humor game in general, but you can do very crazy things in here. So one of the things we've tried to, because we really do try to innovate, sort of kind of go back to the original promise of tabletop D&D story-heavy role-playing games, but kind of innovate on them too. So one of the things is the skill system that you mentioned. So for us, skills, even the level up table is, you see these 24 strange, twisted versions of your own portrait, and you kind of put skill points in them to allow them more voice within you. And they start to heckle you. Sometimes they get in trouble. You can take their advice. Sometimes you have to take their advice, or another skill can come and have a conversation with that skill. So we've presented this classical RPG skill system as this kind of faculties within you that talk to you. As you're discovering yourself as a police officer, you're also discovering yourself in the body of a human being. Yeah. So we have skill systems that, govern your ability for composure, or your half-light, which is your fight or flight response. You can fine-tune your metabolism in here. So we've gone really for a kind of realistic structure where you're building a character, and it's his mental and physical faculties, rather than +2 to battle axes.
And a really interesting part in it is that leveling up skills can also be a detriment to yourself, because if you put too much point into your adrenaline gland, you think you're going to be a cool fighting cop, but instead you become an overtly aggressive asshole person who gets into trouble, and it forces you into conflict situations where you're just going to have to punch a dude now.
I mean that's one of the really interesting things I remember reading about RPGs very recently, where it's failure shouldn't just be a detriment, and I think it's very interesting when RPGs, where if you succeed on a roll, sometimes things bad might happen. Call of Cthulhu does that really well, I tend to find, where sometimes it's best not to piece together what has just happened behind the scenes.
Sometimes it's best not to succeed a hand-eye coordination roll when you're aiming at a child with a gun, for example. I'm not saying this happens in No Truce with the Furies, but it happens in No Truce with the Furies. But yeah, there's a lot of, I like to have challenge in it. Yeah. It doesn't mean for a role-playing game that, everything goes if the failures also lead you to something. But what I want is, I want everything to have a natural kind of story, a result, everything that you do, that feels that it's fulfilling as content, so that you can experience failing at these things or succeeding at them if they're wild things, and they're equally written out. So you don't get cut out of content for failing, but you get pushed into different content. That's the dream.
You don't feel loading after a failure. Yeah. You feel like, oh my god, I failed, and this is part of my character and my the life that he lives, right?
You're still progressing along with the failure, and it's adds to who you are as a person.
And we as writers have gone through this insane process of planting that in your head now, because we also narrate the voices of you character. So as you go along, you solve this pretty complex case. You also have these memories of that last time you failed at something somewhere. So this needs to have reactions now, that the text also acknowledges. So to me, I found what the RPG player wants is an almost lifelike, almost impossible way for the game to acknowledge all of your little failures and successes. Yeah. And the way that we hope we're going to be able to make this is that we've made the game slightly shorter than epic RPGs are generally. We're in many ways kind of like the anti-epic RPG. This is about one little thing you're doing, at the verge of ultimate failure as a human being. So, and the police officer. But if you do finally get it done, it's supposed to, for us, feel like this kind of professional redemption, or kind of, there is a way to end the story in a kind of triumph also.
Although that seems to hint there's multiple ways to end, sometimes in triumph and sometimes things take a darker turn, like alcoholism or so on.
Yeah, there are also like things that feel at the end of the game like a failure. So, but we want them to be content-wise rich enough for you to understand that this was your game. So you can become a rambling drunk and even a hobo.
And the hobo cop.
You can become the hobo cop too.
There may or may not be specific mechanics to facilitate being a hobo cop.
Not promising anything, but there may be. Think of like a No Man's Sky, but for poor people.
Oh, that'd be so
It is.
interesting.
That's one of
explore new environment.
that's one of the things we're also doing. This cup is tremendously poor, and has a huge debt issue. So generally in RPGs, like paying for the inn isn't the problem. Like come on, I have like a +7 flaming sword. This isn't a problem. Like all RPG characters are wealthy characters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this cop is not. I mean, he's spent the last of his times on liquor, and then he has nowhere to sleep at night. So our game's game over screen became a homeless person. Less of a cop and more like just a hobo now. So, another story went on, but it wasn't the detective story anymore. So we have a survival mechanism that's about gathering money. So money is a really important, as it is in true life, in our life, there is
If you run out of money, you die.
Game over. So there is a pretty hardcore survival mechanism to gathering money, which also makes being cop and taking bribes like a reality of the job. So yeah, we test the player in many ways, trying to have them survive this kind of seaside ghetto urban environment.
Yeah. Although just to swing it back to the skills mechanics. So when I was talking to a friend who's very deep into RPGs, like plays them in and out and just all of them. There's a common complaint that he finds is where 1 or 2 skills will get like overused, and then like you'll have like 4 skills get underused. Like if talking like tabletop RPGs, like acrobatics checks usually just get used like no tomorrow, and then you have like knowledge checks where you'll have 1 or 2 never get used again. So how are you trying to balance this for your game?
This brings me to one of my favorite design tenets of RPGs. I'm a bit of an RPG philosopher, you see. I like asymmetric design. Some skills should be used less than others. So as you're a cop, you would use empathy a lot. You would use logic a lot. You would use rhetoric a lot. You wouldn't, for example, the game wouldn't call you to constantly use acrobatics, which we call savoir-faire, because cops don't actually need to be ninjas. Or we have like really esoteric skills like Inland Empire, which is like your imagination. You can imagine that you're talking to the corpse, that you're, going through a body inspection scene, and you can imagine what he would tell you if he would be alive right now. Yeah. So you have like really this entire extreme toolbox of options, but some of them are better if they come along every once in a blue moon, but they leave a really cool impression. So we want to make every one of our 24 skills, which is quite a lot, have like this moment of awesome or like this reward. But some are there constantly, even slightly starting to make you think like, shut up, dude. Like empathy. I'm constantly feeling this. It can become like a bit of a problem for your character that you're feeling this kind of things. But some things can be like this, especially, strange moment. Like we have a skill called Shivers, which if you're a high physique character, you start having these weird cold spells, and you slowly start to maybe understand, if you put a lot of points in the skill, that this may be a way for the city of Revachol to communicate with. So you have this kind of.
It's like you feel the environment in a way. It's very hard to describe kind of sensation of like
the street speaking to you, so to say.
Yeah.
And then
just get a sense of like the environment.
So obviously that doesn't happen all the time. So basically, asymmetric design. I can't 100%, promise that we will have the most balanced system there is. But we have, as of now, about 1,000 skill checks in the game.
Okay.
And then the game is, I'd say 60% done. So the least active skill we have that has things that the skill says or lets you do or intervenes in your action or guides you is something that has 25 or 26 occurrences. So that's an insane amount of skills. Actually, I don't want to shitmouth New Vegas. I love Fallout New Vegas. But if you look at their wiki page, you understand that each of the science, they have 10 skills. They have like 5, 6, actions within dialogues. So we have a tremendous amount of them. So it isn't really a worry for us to underuse them. We kind of have to go and cull the ones we've overused.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough. Like, I do agree, like, in the idea of, like, balancing skills, so you don't have one skill that just never gets used, because then players spec out to get the most overused skills. But on the other hand, I do understand, like, if you're aiming for asymmetrical design and you're trying to make it unbalanced on purpose, if you do it on purpose, it's more like
something like a sword.
Yeah,
It's like it balances on the hilt. There's like a lot, but it's heavy. There's a short bit here, but it's heavy, and there's a long bit here, but it's light.
You
so
should
it
be a
balances
writer.
out.
That's a great metaphor. Yeah, but that is you balance the sword on the hilt. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Have this be the name of the interview. Zaum, you balance the sword on the hilt.
Or you can be Hobocop. Okay, so when I was playing through the intro, like, it was narrated and there was this wonderful narration being done, like, kind of...
Goodman, a metal vocalist from a UK band called Sixth, did the voice for us. Yeah, he's like a main dream sequence narrator for us, who narrates the innermost depths of the characters, like even skills below the skills. So this hidden faculties. Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
It is your brain stem speaking to you, basically.
Yeah, the primordial brain. And I was just wondering how much of this game would be voice acted.
Yeah, we're going for a very minimal amount for the rest of the game. We want the beginnings of every dialogue, like the 3-4 first cards or things that people say, to be voiced.
Get like a sense for the character and what's their personality from their voice, so it like feeds into what's written there to fill out the psychological profile of the characters.
But then we want the voice to kind of cease, because we've discovered as players ourselves that if there's text and voice at the same time, I read faster than I listen to the voice. Yeah. So there's a lot of work. It kind of starts, even getting in the way in the end.
Yeah, it gets very, very annoying when you read faster than the guy is still speaking the thing.
At the same time, we don't want the world to be mute, so we have the beginning of like the greetings. In RPG terms, they're called greetings, by the way, of characters who are voiced, so you get a feeling for them. And we want the dream sequences whenever you hear the primordial brain, it's an ancient reptilian brain, and those starts. We want those to be fully voiced, because it has a cool kind of design symmetry, so you hear yourself sort of.
It's like a moment of rest for the player as well. It's that one time that, okay, this is the voice part, I can like lean back and just like let the voice like read it for me. I can rest my eyes for a moment.
Yeah, just embrace like the atmosphere of like the voice.
Mike is a singer too, and then we have music made by a British band actually called British Sea Power. I have their patch. I'm a huge fan. So it's almost like music, really. He kind of has a melody there, so it becomes a kind of song experience, but not in a stupid way.
So when I was checking through the game, I noticed there was a time counter in the bottom right that slowly ticked away. Will time be an important factor to keep an eye on?
Are we ready enough to start making promises on time? I think we are. I think it's solid already.
It's spooky.
I'm going to start doing it now. I'm gonna go off script. I'm gonna trump this. So anyway, Mexicans. No, really. No. Anyway, the system we have in the game now is you play the.
We literally
pretty nice alpha.
Stumbled upon it last week, basically.
Yeah, but we already love it so much that we're, for some reason, talking about it in the interviews. The system we have now is that every line of dialogue you read, every time you click something, every time you say something or you press the continue button, or you see an orb in the world and read something, every time we know the player has invested time in the game reading, 1 minute goes by. And it doesn't have a sound, but the number does change. And every time you get 30, you hear this like tick tick. Every time it's a full hour, it's a dong, like little knowledge to let you know that something's happening. This way you kind of get to explore the world at your own leisurely tempo. When you're walking around, there's no time moving by, kind of taking the world in, but there's something, minute goes by. And when you talk to people, that's where the most of the crux of the time for the player will be spent is going. So based on that, I think we can do some pretty crazy things with time. It's a very realistic game. And when I've played Baldur's Gate, I've always wanted to like leave my dudes going to sleep at 9 o'clock so that they don't like have weird, that I role play their time schedules.
They wake up at like 3 in the morning and it's like, you need to sleep again, so another 8 hours goes by. It's irritating.
So what we want to do here is this kind of very realistic time system. So each day you gotta collect a kind of certain amount of money to pay for your bills and have daily upkeep, and you don't want to get thrown out on the street. And you can meet people at certain times, and you can think like, I gotta kill some time because I can't just rewind it. So you gotta go and talk to another person and manage time in a way that I don't think we sort of have to come up with a time system that RPGs haven't done before, because the kernel of our writing is so realistic. It would feel out of place. But I think we're getting it there too. That the great effect of this that we're going for, or that I hope is going to happen, and I've already seen it in Engine 2, so when the evening finally comes, it feels momentous, like the end of your first day. So it's not just a little orange overview. You've worked, like you've gone through these minutes. So, in ambitious literature, time states are, an important thing. So I think we can get it in there. I'm not promising a revolution, but I'm promising a revolution.
So it's just like you'll feel like environmental changes in the environment as like the day comes to a close, and that might have
a psychological thing of like closing out the day. Like, all right, I've done like this and that. I need to wait that one last thing to run by, get a grocery store,
and you might discover that some characters are up at night. The pawn shop guy Roy is up at nights, like looking at his weird, psychedelic reels that he likes to look at films, or like one of the characters you may be surprised that she may even not sleep at all. You might find out like a weird thing about them, but other characters like out at partying and so on. So again, I'm not saying we have radiant AI for writing. I'm not saying we have the dream where like literally every character has a perfectly written timetable where they and that 1300 a special character appears there, but that's what I'm saying.
Like Easter egg characters, you have to be at the right day at the right time.
But we can do that, and we can do time quests also. I think we can do it. We can do it.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Like, especially if like you end up with like a case where you have to solve it by a particular time or something like that.
For example, a giant bloated hanged corpse that has been there for a week already, and that keeps decomposing as you're trying to solve the case.
Yeah. Awesome. So, thanks for the interview. So, where can people find out more about No Truce with the Furies?
We have a website.
It's called notrucewiththefuries.com.
Is it Studio.com?
If you write No Truce with the Furies into your internet browser, you will see an official site.
Sweet.
Yeah. We have interesting stuff coming at the end of the year. We have an announcement trailer. We will keep updating our blog with like the character sheet that we have, and then cool mechanics like the fort cabinet and stuff. So keep an eye on it.
Sweet. And do you have like a Twitter or a Facebook and that kind of thing?
We have all of them. This is neoliberalism, brother. We are on everything you can imagine.
And they'll just find out on the website, or do you want to give the Twitter name as well?
Yeah, Twitter us at No Truce with the Furies, and then Facebook using the same title.
Sweet. Thank you for the interview.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.